Okay, so there's a version of you, or a version of somebody, that checks their bank balance before they buy a coffee. And I don't mean out of habit, I mean out of necessity. You're doing the math before the cashier even rings you up. Rent, minus groceries, minus that thing that broke last week. And whatever's left decides if tonight's gonna be stressful or just kinda tense. And here's the thing, that's where almost every fortune actually starts, not in some boardroom. It starts in a moment of total, brutal clarity, where every single dollar has a name and a job, and none of them are yours to waste. At zero, money isn't some abstract idea. It's not a symbol, it's not a scoreboard, it's oxygen. And when you're struggling to breathe, you're not thinking about air quality. You're thinking about the next breath. That's it. So here's the first real truth about wealth, and it's one people don't like to admit. It doesn't start as ambition. It starts as fear management. The person with nothing isn't chasing riches. They're running from something very specific. Eviction, being hungry, that phone call from a collections agency, the shame of asking your family for help again. And at this stage, every purchase weighs way more than it should. A $10 decision can hit you like it's a $10,000 one. That's not weakness, by the way. That's your brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Treating scarcity like a threat, because at this level, it is one. But, and almost nobody tells you this phase teaches you something the rich spend their whole lives trying to get back. Precision. When you've got nothing, you know exactly what everything costs. Not just in dollars, in effort, in time, and what you gave up to get it. That precision? That's the seed of every dollar that comes after. Lose it too early, and you lose the whole compass. Now, somewhere between zero and your first real cushion, a few grand that isn't already spoken for, something shifts. It's subtle. You're still checking the balance, but you're checking it different. Not out of dread, out of curiosity. This is milestone number one, going from survival to sufficiency. And honestly, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like a low hum in the background just stops. A hum you didn't even realize was always running. At this point, money starts pulling away from pure panic and turns into something more like a tool. Still limited, still imperfect, but usable. You get a flat tire, it's not a 5-alarm fire anymore. Somebody asks you to dinner, you just say yes, instead of doing math about whether that means skipping a meal later. But here's the trap. Almost everybody falls into it right here. You mistake relief for security. Your nervous system's been starved for so long, and the second it gets a taste of breathing room, it wants to celebrate. And that, right there, is where most people's whole financial trajectory stalls out. Not because they're not ambitious, because they exhale too early. The ones who keep going past this point. They all share one thing. They treat that first cushion as a foundation, not a reward. They keep the precision from part one. They just stop being terrified while they use it. So now you're in the tens of thousands, maybe low hundreds of thousands, and the whole relationship with money flips again. It's not about covering what could go wrong anymore. It's about what could go right. This is the options phase. You can move. You can take 3 months to figure out what's next instead of grabbing the first thing somebody offers you. For the first time, money's not buying safety. It's buying time to think, and it's buying you the ability to say no. And honestly, saying no is the real currency here, more than the number in the account. The first time you turn down money, a bad client, a toxic job, a deal that just feels off, because you can afford to, that's a bigger moment than the first time you ever earned money in the first place. But this stage has its own trap, too. Because options feel so good after years of having none, people start chasing the feeling of freedom instead of freedom itself. You buy the car, the watch, the upgrade. Not because it gets you anywhere, because it proves, mostly to yourself, that the bad years are over. That's not stupid, by the way. That's just a very human way of trying to close an old wound with a receipt. The people who keep building, they learn to separate those two things. They take the options, without spending money just to feel the relief of having them. Nobody sees that distinction from the outside. But on the inside, it's everything. It's the difference between a comfortable life and one that keeps compounding. Your first $1 million changes something structural in how you see risk. Before this, every money decision runs through one filter. What's the worst that happens? Risk gets measured by downside, because that's what you've actually lived through. But past a certain point, the question quietly flips from, what could I lose, to, what am I missing out on? That's not recklessness. That's recalibration. Once your survival's off the table, once losing a bet wouldn't touch your rent or your dignity, the guy who used to fear a bad month starts fearing a wasted decade instead. This is also where relationships start shifting. Old friends from the scarcity years can't always relate to decisions that aren't bound by the same limits anymore. And you start noticing who's asking how you're doing and who's asking what you're worth. Meanwhile, your money starts working without you watching it. Investments compound while you sleep. For the first time since zero, effort and income aren't tied together in real time, and money slowly unhooking itself from your hours becomes the whole story from here on out. Between 1 and 10 million, money stops being a record of your labor and starts becoming its own thing entirely. Early on, every dollar had your fingerprints on it, the hour you worked, the shift you covered. Now, a real chunk of your wealth exists because of a decision made months or years ago, not anything you did today. The capital's got its own momentum. That messes with people more than they admit. There's a weird guilt watching your net worth rise on a day you did nothing to deserve it. The old instinct that value requires visible effort collides with a reality where the biggest gains come from patience, not labor. So the real work is learning to trust a system you can't babysit every minute. That's hard, because the same hyper-vigilance that got you out of poverty fights you here. Compounding rewards, patience. Trauma rewards control. They don't get along. The ones who thrive build structures, advisors, systems, diversified holdings, that run without them staring at it all day. Same discipline that built the fortune, just point it somewhere new. Past 10 million, your whole frame of reference stops being local. Geographically and mentally, both. Your holdings spread across markets and currencies, so a downturn anywhere gets absorbed, not felt. But the deeper shift is how you see your own life, no longer bound by the town you grew up in, or the ceiling that felt fixed 10 years ago. The question stops being, can I afford this? And becomes, does this matter? And is anything actually stopping me? For most people, at every earlier stage, something was always stopping them. Here, for the first time, the honest answer is usually no. That reach changes relationships again. Proximity stops mattering, but that same freedom exposes which relationships were only ever built on circumstance, not on shared values. By 9 figures, something's come full circle. At 0, every decision was about time. How many hours stood between you and the next necessity? At 100 million, it's about time again. Except now, it's about protecting it from everyone trying to take it back. That's the quiet secret. The number was never the point. It was always a stand-in for spending your hours exactly how you want, answering to nobody. In theory, that time is now fully recovered. So here's what this climb tells you. Money was never really the point. It was the instrument. The real transformation was psychological. Fear to sufficiency, sufficiency to options, options to risk tolerance to trust, trust to reach, and finally reach back around to time. The exact thing that was scarce at the very beginning. And here's the paradox. The qualities that get you up the mountain, discipline, vigilance, emotional distance, the ability to say no, are the same qualities that make it hard to enjoy standing at the top. Wealth doesn't fix the psychology that built it. It just raises the stakes on which parts of it you keep.